The UN emergency session erupted into chaos. Delegates lunged from their seats, some screaming, others frozen in shock. Security personnel rushed to restrain Ambassador Chen as he clawed toward the massive display screen, now showing only static where moments before his daughter had stood. "We need to clear the chamber," Secretary General Okafor commanded, her voice barely audible above the pandemonium. Now. Outside, the first news alerts pinged across billions of devices simultaneously. Live streams captured the moment in brutal clarity, replaying it across social media before content filters could engage. Within minutes, Earth's orbital defense systems activated under automatic protocols, though they were little more than symbolic gestures against the technological superiority of the Naxari vessels. Inside the private diplomatic chamber adjacent to the UN floor, Admiral Helen Chen sat motionless, her husband collapsed against her shoulder. The room had emptied of all but essential personnel. "Admiral," General Williams spoke softly, "we need your authorization for emergency response protocols." Helen Chen looked up, her eyes reflecting not grief but something colder. "They miscalculated," she said, her voice eerily steady. "They fundamentally miscalculated." The Naxari transmission had resumed, displaying the Supreme Commander's translucent, multifaceted face. The translation software conveyed its clicks and whistles into precise English. "The demonstration has been completed as agreed in Diplomatic Protocol Section 15A. The removal of an immature specimen signifies our recognition of your governing hierarchy. You may now proceed with surrender negotiations. We have prepared accommodation sectors for your leadership." General Williams stared at the screen. "They think this was expected, that we agreed to this." Dr. Zhang Chen raised his head slowly. "Their first transmission," he whispered. "The untranslated one we received 3 weeks ago. I found inconsistencies in the cultural exchange protocols." His voice cracked. "I reported it. I filed the reports. Nobody understood the significance." The Naxari commander continued, "Your emotional displays indicate successful receipt of our message. 17 civilizations before yours have responded identically. Attachment to immature specimens is inefficient but provides clear negotiation advantages to advanced species." The room fell silent as understanding dawned. The aliens hadn't committed an act of war in their minds. They believed they were following established first contact procedures. Admiral Chen stood slowly, straightening her uniform. "General, initiate silent protocol blackout. No response to any Naxari communication." "But Admiral Thale, they expect immediate capitulation. When it doesn't come, they'll hesitate, uncertain." She turned to the room's occupants, her expression transformed by grief into something beautiful and terrible. "Humanity has never faced extinction before. We lack precedent for this moment." She looked at her husband, who nodded almost imperceptibly. "I want every major military and scientific leader in Geneva within 12 hours. Complete communications blackout with the Naxari vessels." As she turned to leave, an aide asked quietly, "What will we do, Admiral?" Helen Chen paused at the doorway. "We will show them precisely what they have awakened." Colonel Yamamoto's military transport cut through darkened skies, flying without navigation lights. The pilot maintained radio silence as they approached the underground facility in the Swiss Alps. On any normal day, this violation of European airspace would have triggered international incidents. Today, borders had become meaningless. Inside the mountain complex, Yamamoto found organized chaos. Engineers from 37 nations worked side by side, repurposing civilian technology with military precision. The colonel paused, watching as a South Korean gaming console manufacturer demonstrated how their cooling systems could be modified for tactical applications. "They've been arriving hourly," said General Ibori, appearing at his side. "Some drove across continents to get here. Others came in fishing boats." Yamamoto nodded. "And the Naxari?" "Still orbiting, still waiting." The general led him through security checkpoints toward the central command room. "They've sent 17 additional transmissions, each more confused than the last." The command center hummed with quiet intensity. At its center stood Admiral Chen, surrounded by holographic displays showing Earth's rapidly transforming infrastructure. She acknowledged Yamamoto with a nod. "Colonel, your assessment?" Yamamoto studied the tactical displays. They're following their established conquest pattern. First contact, demonstration of power, acceptance of surrender. He pointed to the orbital patterns of the alien ships. They're maintaining standard formation, no adaptation, no tactical repositioning. Because they don't expect resistance, Admiral Chen concluded. Precisely. Yamamoto circled the central table. I've studied every transmission we intercepted before official first contact. 17 worlds, 17 identical conquest patterns. The Naxari have never faced meaningful opposition. Dr. Zhang Chen entered, carrying tablets displaying complex molecular structures. Despite his grief, his voice remained steady as he addressed the assembled leaders. The nanobots can be mass-produced using modified medical fabrication facilities. We've simplified the design based on technology already in production for cancer treatments. A Chinese general studied the schematics. These will penetrate their defenses. Their shields are designed to stop kinetic weapons and energy blasts, Dr. Chen explained. Not microscopic particles that appear identical to cosmic radiation. They've never needed protection against such subtle approaches. Admiral Chen turned to face the assembled leadership. The Naxari expect us to behave like their previous conquests, to remain paralyzed by grief and fear. Their tactical advantage exists only if we respond as expected. She activated a global map showing thousands of blinking lights, each representing a facility being converted for the coming response. Humanity has spent its existence fighting itself, she continued. We have perfected the art of finding weaknesses, exploiting vulnerabilities. Now we turn that expertise outward. Yamamoto watched the determination spreading across faces in the room. The initial shock had transformed into something the Naxari couldn't comprehend. They believed they demonstrated their power by taking a child. Admiral Chen said, her voice dropping. They have no concept of what they've actually done. From the corner, a communication specialist called out, Admiral, Naxari command ship is broadcasting again. They're requesting acknowledgement of their terms. Admiral Chen exchanged glances with her husband, then with Yamamoto. Continue communications blackout. Let them wonder why their perfect strategy has failed. Yamamoto nodded in approval. We have something they don't, Admiral. What's that, Colonel? Experience with the unexpected. They've only known success. We've survived millennia of failure. For the first time since the broadcast, something resembling a smile crossed Admiral Chen's face. Then let's give them an education. Dr. Amara Okafor's fingers danced across the holographic interface, adjusting parameters as the first wave of nanobots reported successful infiltration. The command center beneath Geneva had transformed into the nerve center of humanity's response, its walls now lined with displays showing penetration metrics for each Naxari vessel. 73% infiltration on the command ship, she announced, voice steady despite having worked 36 hours without rest. Environmental systems accessed. Life support remains untouched as ordered. Across the room, Colonel Yamamoto nodded in approval. The strategy had been contested. Many military leaders had pushed for immediate sabotage of all alien life support once the nanobots gained access. The colonel had argued differently. They must be conscious to understand. He'd insisted. Dead enemies learn nothing. A young technician approached with a tablet. Dr. Okafor, we've completed analysis of their neural patterns from the medical data the nanobots transmitted. Okafor studied the complex waveforms, her expression tightening. Fascinating. Their nervous systems operate on completely different frequencies than ours. She highlighted a pattern and expanded it. This explains their incomprehension of our response. Their neural architecture processes emotional reactions as temporary system disruptions, not as sustained states. Admiral Chen joined them, reviewing the findings. Can we use this? Already implementing it. Okafor confirmed. The radiation pulses have been recalibrated to target these specific neural pathways. When activated, it will disrupt their motor functions without causing permanent damage. On the main display, a three-dimensional rendering of the Naxxari fleet hung above Earth. The vessels had maintained their original positions for nearly 4 days, their confusion evident in increasingly frequent and disjointed communications attempts. They've never encountered a species that didn't immediately surrender after their demonstration, Yamamoto observed. Their tactical doctrine has no contingency for this scenario. Inside the Naxxari command ship, Supreme Commander Vextrel studied the silent planet below with mounting concern. The Conquest protocol that had succeeded 17 times without variation was failing, and the High Command would hold him responsible. Increase scan intensity. He ordered his subordinates. Find their leadership bunkers. They must be coordinating some response. His second-in-command approached cautiously. Supreme Commander, engineering reports detecting unusual radiation patterns in sectors 7 through 19. Consistent with cosmic background, but slightly elevated. Insignificant, Vextrel dismissed. Focus all resources on locating their command structure. Their emotional paralysis should have triggered surrender negotiations by now. Unnoticed by the Naxxari crew, thousands of microscopic machines continued their silent work, mapping systems, analyzing weaknesses, and establishing control nodes throughout the fleet. Earth's apparent inaction was its most cunning deception. In Geneva, the infiltration percentages climbed steadily across all displays. Dr. Okafor allowed herself a small smile as the command ship indicator reached 90%. Phase 1 completion estimated in 6 hours, she reported. All Naxxari vessels will be compromised before they realize we've responded at all. Admiral Chen studied the tactical display, her expression unreadable. They killed our child on broadcast to demonstrate power, she said quietly. Now we'll show them what power truly means. Yamamoto nodded, not through brutality or terror, but through patience and precision. He watched as another vessel's infiltration metrics turned green. The qualities they believed were our weaknesses will be the instruments of their defeat. Dr. Okafor's console chimed as another system fell under human control. The web is nearly complete, she said. They won't even feel it until we tighten the threads. The transmission from Earth played on repeat throughout the Naxxari fleet. Carefully selected footage showed children hiding in basements, medical workers treating psychological trauma, and religious leaders offering prayers for mercy. Humanity presented exactly what the aliens expected, a broken species preparing to surrender. Supreme Commander Vextrel studied the images with satisfaction. Prepare landing protocols, he ordered. Select population centers for first phase occupation, priority on governmental and military installations. His subordinates moved with practiced efficiency, having performed these exact procedures 17 times before. The command ship's forward observation deck filled with high-ranking Naxxari, eager to witness another successful conquest. Atmospheric entry in 60 seconds, announced the navigation officer. All vessels report ready. On Earth, Colonel Yamamoto stood in the mountaintop facility that had been converted into humanity's primary defense command. Massive screens displayed every Naxxari vessel's precise location and trajectory. Military leaders from 28 nations surrounded him, watching silently as the moment approached. They believe our transmission was capitulation, Yamamoto explained calmly. Their confidence is absolute. They have no concept of deception as we understand it. General Williams studied the tactical display, and you're certain about their neural vulnerabilities. Dr. Okafor's analysis is conclusive. Their sensory processing centers are fundamentally different from ours, Yamamoto replied. The radiation will disrupt their neural pathways while leaving human tissue unaffected. Admiral Chen's voice came through the command channel. All ground forces in position, satellites aligned and ready. Yamamoto nodded, watching as the first Naxxari ships breached atmosphere, massive vessels descending toward major cities with arrogant slowness. Their lighting configurations shifted to intimidation patterns developed through centuries of conquest. Their deploying in standard occupation formation, confirmed a tactical officer. No deviation from expected patterns. Yamamoto turned to face the assembled commanders. Humanity has spent millennia perfecting the art of warfare against itself. We've learned to anticipate, to deceive, to strike from unexpected angles. He checked the final countdown timer. The Naxari have never needed these skills, until today. He activated the command channel. Execute Operation Nemesis. Across Earth's orbit, thousands of microsatellites simultaneously fired precisely calibrated radiation pulses. The beams, invisible to human eyes, passed harmlessly through Earth's atmosphere and struck the descending Naxari fleet. Inside the command ship, Vextrel was midway through dictating occupation protocols when his limbs suddenly failed. Around him, his officers collapsed against consoles, their multiple limbs twitching uncontrollably. Warning alarms activated as ship after ship lost navigational control. Emergency. Protocols. Vextrel struggled to vocalize as his neural pathways misfired. His vision fragmented as the radiation disrupted his optical processing. On Earth, Yamamoto watched as the massive ships faltered. Some managed controlled descents into unpopulated areas, while others hovered erratically. None maintained their original invasion trajectories. Phase 1 successful, reported the tactical officer. All Naxari vessels compromised. Ground forces moving to secure crash sites. Yamamoto nodded, turning to Admiral Chen on the main screen. Selective targeting systems performed exactly as designed. Civilian areas protected. Admiral Chen's expression remained resolute. Proceed to Phase 2. Boarding parties ready. Across the command center, officers exchanged glances of cautious optimism. For the first time in their long history of conquest, the Naxari were experiencing something entirely foreign to them: defeat. Yamamoto turned back to the tactical display, watching as Earth's forces converged on the disabled alien ships. They thought they understood us, he said quietly. They never realized that a species that evolved through conflict would perfect the art of turning apparent weakness into strength. Admiral Helen Chen moved through the corridors of the Naxari command ship with measured steps, the Special Forces team creating a protective formation around her. The vessel's interior glowed with bioluminescent panels that pulsed erratically, affected by the neural disruption fields still radiating throughout the ship. Disabled Naxari crew members lined the passageways, their multiple limbs trembling as Earth's scientists carefully calibrated the radiation to maintain their consciousness while preventing coordinated movement. Medical teams followed behind the military escort, documenting alien physiology for further refinement of the targeted fields. Command deck ahead, reported the team leader, checking sensor readings. 15 Naxari life signs detected. Supreme Commander's biosignature confirmed. Helen nodded, her expression remaining composed despite the storm of emotions beneath. The path to this moment had begun with her daughter's execution. It would end with understanding, not vengeance, though the line between them had grown increasingly thin. The massive doors to the command deck parted as Earth's override codes unlocked the ship's systems. Inside, the Naxari leadership struggled against the neural disruption, their crystalline exoskeletons clicking in distress as they attempted to coordinate a response. Supreme Commander Vextrel occupied the central platform, his larger form distinguished by elaborate markings along his carapace. All four of his eye clusters fixed on Admiral Chen as she entered. The universal translator at her wrist activated, converting the commander's strained clicks and whistles. Unprecedented response, the translation came. Tactical error acknowledged. Helen approached slowly, maintaining careful distance as she studied the being responsible for Maya's death. You believed our emotional attachments were weaknesses to exploit, she said evenly. A fundamental miscalculation. The commander's limbs twitched in what the scientist had identified as confusion. 17 species, identical methodology, identical results. His speech patterns fragmented under the neural disruption. Logical conclusion. Universal constant. Helen removed a small device from her pocket, a secure tablet displaying Maya's photograph. "This was my daughter," she said, her voice remaining steady through years of military discipline. "What you interpreted as a demonstration of power revealed something else entirely, your profound ignorance." She turned to her tactical officer. "Show him." The officer activated a holographic display showing Earth's unified response. Factories retooled within hours, former enemies sharing military resources, civilians volunteering in unprecedented numbers. The images shifted to displays of the Naxuri fleet's vulnerabilities, meticulously mapped by human scientists and exploited with surgical precision. "Your species conquers through force and fear," Helen continued, expecting others to calculate survival probabilities and submit. But humans evolved differently. She moved closer to the commander, her eyes never leaving his. "When you threatened our children, you didn't discover our weakness. You revealed our greatest strength." Understanding seemed to flicker across the commander's alien features as the translator processed his response. The immature specimen. Tactical leverage became strategic error. "Her name was Maya," Helen corrected, her voice finally betraying the slightest tremor. "And she was worth more than your entire empire." Dr. Zhang Chen entered the command deck, accompanied by scientific personnel carrying specialized equipment. His eyes met his wife's briefly before focusing on the Supreme Commander. "We've analyzed your neural architecture," he stated clinically. "The radiation fields can be adjusted to permanent effect or gradually diminished." He paused, the implication clear. "The choice depends on your cooperation." The commander's limbs stilled as the translator conveyed his response. 17 worlds before. None responded as humans have. His eye clusters rotated toward Helen. "What parameters determine your species' response?" Helen studied the alien leader, seeing not a monster, but something perhaps more dangerous, a being utterly incapable of comprehending the values that defined humanity. "Love," she answered simply. "Something your species seems to have evolved without." Dr. Zhang Chen sat alone with the captured Supreme Commander, the secure holding facility silent except for the gentle hum of environmental controls calibrated for Naxuri physiology. 2 weeks had passed since Earth's forces had neutralized the alien fleet. The world oscillated between celebrating victory and demanding retribution. Zhang activated the holographic projector. Images of Maya filled the space between them, her 6th birthday, blowing out candles on a cake shaped like a spaceship, her school science fair project about potential alien communication methods, her last Christmas morning, eyes wide with delight at a telescope. "Your species records memories this way." The universal translator rendered the commander's clicks and whistles into flat, emotionless English. "We preserve moments," John corrected. "Not just information, but feeling. Context. Connection." The commander's eye clusters rotated, studying each image with analytical intensity. The neural disruption field had been calibrated to allow movement and speech while preventing any aggressive action. "These recordings serve what function?" John considered the question, recognizing the genuine incomprehension behind it. "They help us remember who we are, who she was." He gestured to an image of Maya laughing as waves crashed around her knees at the beach. "These moments shaped her, and through her, they shaped us." The commander's limbs shifted in the gesture scientists had identified as contemplation. "The other species we encountered, they surrendered to protect their immature specimens. You," his mandibles clicked rapidly, "you fight because of them." "For them," John corrected, "there's a difference." Outside the holding facility, protest had grown. Millions demanded the execution of the Naxuri leadership, military tribunals, retribution for Maya and for the attempted invasion. World leaders debated humanity's next step, with some advocating for the immediate development of offensive capabilities using reverse-engineered Naxuri technology. The commander extended a limb toward the hologram of Maya, teaching her younger cousin to tie shoelaces. This immature specimen, Maya, demonstrated caregiving behaviors toward an unrelated immature specimen. Yes, John confirmed. She was kind. A survival disadvantage, the commander observed. An evolutionary advantage, John countered. Our capacity for cooperation, for caring beyond immediate genetic benefit, is why humans survived as a species. He swiped to a final image, Maya's drawing of what she imagined aliens might look like, created months before the Naxari arrival. Her childish depiction showed peaceful green beings offering flowers to smiling humans. She wanted to meet you, John said quietly. To learn from you. To teach you. Not to conquer or be conquered. The commander fell silent, multiple limbs now completely still in what researchers had identified as the Naxari equivalent of deep contemplation. Your daughter's termination was based on conquest protocols established across 17 successful subjugations. The commander finally responded. I did not. The translator paused, searching for equivalent terms. I did not understand what I was destroying. Zhang stood, collecting the holographic projector. That's why we're having this conversation instead of executing your entire crew. He moved toward the exit, then paused. The tribunal begins tomorrow. They want to know if your kind can learn, if coexistence is possible. And your assessment. The commander's question came just as the door began to close. Zhang turned back, his expression unreadable. Maya would have believed it possible. I'm trying to see the universe through her eyes now. His voice softened. It's the only way I can bear to look at it at all. The transmission from Proxima Centauri arrived exactly 3 days after Earth intercepted communications between the Naxari homeworld and their defeated Armada. The message came not in Naxari language, but in a mathematical sequence recognizable to human cryptographers, a desperate attempt to communicate across species barriers. Colonel Yamamoto stood with Admiral Chen and world leaders in the newly established Unified Defense Command, watching as linguists decoded the transmission. The holographic display flickered as alien faces appeared, distinctly non-Naxari, with flexible features and 4 eyes arranged in diamond patterns. We are the Vanthi Collective, the translation read. Your resistance against the Dominion has been witnessed. We request dialogue. The room fell silent. Humanity had barely processed its victory against one alien threat. Now, another species reached out from the stars. They're from the fourth world conquered by the Naxari, reported the intelligence officer, referencing data extracted from captured Naxari databases. Subjugated approximately 300 Earth years ago. Admiral Chen studied the alien faces. They're taking an enormous risk contacting us. If the Naxari detected this transmission. They're desperate, Yamamoto observed. Look at their surroundings. He pointed to details in the background, makeshift technology, stress markers visible in the aliens' physiology. This isn't an official communication. It's a resistance movement. The transmission continued. The Dominion prepares punitive fleet. Your world targeted for complete sterilization. 17 subjugated worlds watch. Hope spreads. Dr. Okafor entered the command center, carrying data tablets displaying Naxari vessel schematics. We've completed analysis of their propulsion technology. With modifications, we could convert their landed ships for our use within months. The Secretary General turned to Admiral Chen. Your recommendation? Helen Chen had carried the weight of Earth's defense since the day her daughter died. Now she faced a decision that would define humanity's place among the stars. The Naxari will return with overwhelming force, she stated. Their empire spans dozens of systems. We've humiliated them, broken their perfect conquest record. They cannot allow that to stand. Yamamoto nodded in agreement. Standard military doctrine would suggest fortifying Earth, focusing all resources on home defense. But, prompted the Chinese president, sensing the unspoken alternative. But that leaves 17 potential allies under Naxari control, Yamamoto continued. Species with intimate knowledge of Naxari weaknesses, tactical patterns, technology. Allies who could multiply our effectiveness. A aide approached Admiral Chen, handing her a tablet. "Ma'am, we've completed the translation of Maya's journal. You asked to be notified immediately." Helen's composure slipped momentarily as she accepted the tablet, scrolling to the final entry. She read aloud, "If aliens exist, I hope they're friendly. But if they're not, I hope Earth helps anyone they've hurt. That's what makes us human. We don't just fight for ourselves." Dr. Zhang Chen, who had been silently observing from the corner, stepped forward. "Maya would have voted for rescue," he said quietly. Helen looked up from the tablet, her decision made. "We've already established that the Naxari fundamentally misunderstood humanity. Let's not make the same mistake about ourselves." She turned to the tactical display showing the captured alien vessels. "We go to them. We fight not just for Earth, but for everyone these conquerors have harmed." The Secretary General nodded solemnly. "Humanity's first interstellar mission will be one of liberation." Yamamoto studied the star charts extracted from Naxari navigational systems. The nearest subjugated world is 14 light-years away. With modified Naxari drives, we could reach it in months, not decades. Admiral Chen touched her daughter's photograph secured in her uniform pocket. "Prepare our response to the Vanthi. Tell them help is coming." She straightened, addressing the assembled leaders. Maya believed in a humanity that stands for something greater than survival. Let's prove her right. Admiral Helen Chen stood at the observation window of the Stellar Cooperative headquarters, watching students from 18 different species traverse the campus of the Maya Chen Academy. 5 years had transformed humanity from a single-planet civilization into the diplomatic and military cornerstone of an interstellar alliance. "The Eridani delegation has arrived for the commemoration," Dr. Zhang Chen said, joining his wife. They brought crystalline sculptures created by their artisan guild. Apparently, they've been working on them for over a year. Helen nodded, her attention drawn to a particular group of students below. Young Naxari, their exoskeletons not yet fully developed, walking alongside children from formerly subjugated worlds. The Naxari homeworld's admission to the cooperative remained controversial, but the reformation program for their youth had shown promising results. The Vanthi educational minister reports their first generation born free of Naxari control has reached adolescence. John continued, following her gaze. "They're calling them the Maya generation. Children who never knew subjugation." Helen's expression softened. She would have loved that. Together they walked through the hallways of the academy, passing classrooms where instructors from a dozen species taught everything from interstellar navigation to comparative biology. The facility had been built on the exact site where the Naxari command ship had been secured after the failed invasion. They reached the memorial garden at the center of the campus. Students and dignitaries from across known space had gathered around a simple statue. A human child offering a friendship bracelet, her expression one of hope and curiosity. At its base lay thousands of offerings from different worlds. Flowers, crystals, luminescent plants, ceremonial tokens. Colonel Yamamoto, now Supreme Commander of the Cooperative Defense Fleet, joined them as the ceremony began. "The Naxari Reformation Council sends their respects," he said quietly. "The younger generation's neural patterns show significant evolution toward empathic response." Dr. Okafor approached, her scientific team having just returned from studying a newly contacted civilization at the edge of charted space. "They're learning," she confirmed. "Their neural architecture is actually adapting. What you two started," she gestured to the Chens, "it's changing more than political structures. It's changing biology." The ceremony commenced with representatives from each member world placing symbolic items at the statue's base. When the young Naxari delegate approached, a female juvenile who had been born after the war, the crowd grew silent. She placed a small holographic projector before the statue. It activated, displaying Maya's face alongside the faces of children from all 18 worlds. Below it, in multiple languages, glowed the words, that we might see the universe through each other's eyes. Helen felt Jane's hand find hers as they watched. The pain remained, a constant companion these 5 years, but alongside it had grown something else. The knowledge that their daughter's death had ultimately created life and freedom for billions across the stars. The Secretary General of the Cooperative, a Vanthi who had led the first resistance movement to contact Earth, stepped forward to address the gathering. 5 years ago, a single human child became the catalyst for the greatest liberation our galaxy has known. The Naxari believed they demonstrated power through cruelty. Humanity showed true power through compassion. Helen looked out at the assembled beings, former enemies and victims now standing as allies, and whispered words meant only for her daughter. They see now, Maya. They'd finally understand. Above them, the combined fleet of the Cooperative patrolled the system, vessels from 18 worlds flying in formation. Their mission had evolved from conquest to protection, from subjugation to cooperation. And at the heart of this transformation stood the memory of a human child who had never lived to see the stars she had helped liberate.